Hey guys, it's Anthony Junio, co-founder and CEO of Before Grad. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about a very important skill I learned as part of building Before Grad myself and then later on with a team, which is delegation. All right, so the ability to delegate, the ability to essentially hand things off, tasks, to other members of the team or even those outside the team, freelancers, or perhaps in some cases even customers or clients, can significantly reduce the amount of work that's on your plate, but then also allow you to get much more done in a smaller amount of time, right? Because every entrepreneur asks themselves the question at some point in time, whether you own a small business or whether you're a co-founder at a startup or whatever it is, even a project that you're working on yourself, you're going to think to yourself at some point in time, how do I get more done in less time, right? And it's a question that, it's sort of open-ended, right? Because I think there's many ways you can tackle that. But the reality is, in the context of entrepreneurship, you have to delegate because that's the only way you can get to, you look at these incredible startups coming out of Y Combinator, coming out of Techstars, or, you featured on TechCrunch, for instance, and you think to yourself, well, how did they build this in 2 years, or how did they manage to get so much done in such a short amount of time? Well, the answer is really delegation, right? I mean, there could be some other aspects there. Maybe they fundraised a ton of money early on, or had really effective, helpful connections in the space, or something like that. But ultimately, when it comes to building your own skill set as an entrepreneur, and even as an investor, I think delegating is so important, right? And so I just wanted to kind of give you some background of why this is so important. The reality is that most entrepreneurs, I think, are so focused building their product, kind of working in the business as opposed to on the business, right? And so the reality is you kind of get that tunnel vision and you're so focused on, getting that version 1.0 complete, or, getting that specific ad creative completed, or, getting that one thing done, that one feature. And the reality is if that's kind of how you're always doing things, it's going to take a lot longer. It'll take 10 times, 20 times the amount of time to do something that somebody else is delegating, right? Because when you're delegating, you're sort of like an octopus with 8 arms, and you actually are getting 8 separate things done, right? You might, hand off an important design that needs to be created in Photoshop to a designer that you find on a freelance website, and you may have a member of your team that's working on building the feature for that particular those specifications you designed the other day, or you might want somebody who will take a look at your pitch deck and provide you with feedback while you're working on something else. Maybe you want somebody who can help find a freelancer for you, or somebody that can join the team. And so you have, somebody responsible for that. Maybe you have a virtual assistant who's doing research for you, trying to determine whether something is true or false. Or maybe they're responding to customer reviews or customer support, or, whatever it might be. You've got to learn to delegate when you're running a business. And that's true for any type of business, not just startups, right? And a great story that comes to mind is, one time we were actually removing a tree from the backyard of my parents' place. And it was this huge oak tree, right? It looked like it was there for, probably the past 50, 60, 70 years. And the problem was it was actually growing over the house, right? And so we had to get rid of it. And so what happened was, we hired this company, and for several $1,000s, they bring this team of guys. Some of them look like they're in high school, some of them look like they're in their mid-30s, mid-40s, and all of these guys, through some, magical ways, it's really incredible because this tree was humongous, and they just managed to basically break it down and look so elegant. By the end of it, they cleaned it up, and it was all sort of a job well done. But what was interesting was midway through the day when they were doing this, I was just curious. I was actually watching them do this, and they were on ropes on separate sides of the tree, balancing limbs of the tree that had already been cut off. It's certainly not an easy job. And there was a car that was driving by slowly in front of the house, And I actually, this car actually came to a stop, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if they are, interested in what's going on or something. And so I decided I would go up to them. And what surprised me was an older fellow, and this guy, he said, I'm just checking on my team, basically, right? And I realized at that point, oh, okay, so he's actually the owner of the business, right? The guy who's actually, sort of running the show behind the scenes, to ensure that this tree gets cut down. And I said, oh, well, you can come out and take a look at what they're doing if you want, get up closer, because the tree was located in the backyard. And the thing was, he said, oh, well, this is only one tree that we're doing today. We actually have 12 others that we're trying to get done. And that's when I realized, well, this guy is not only a smart business owner, but he's a business owner that delegates. And so if you think about it, right, we're spending several $1,000s just to cut down this one oak tree. These guys are probably, if there's 11 or 12 or 13 other oak trees that they're also cutting down, they're probably pulling in 25, 30,000 in revenue in that single day. And so that's really the power of delegating, right? And to be fair, they're paying, I'm sure, expensive insurance, wages for all of these guys, the cost of the equipment, the cost to acquire clients, so I'm sure, at the end of the day, they're not, the business owner is probably pocketing somewhere around 2,000 or 3,000 perhaps, but and that's still super, super impressive, right, for a single day. So that's sort of the idea, right, of delegating, right, because that business owner could have just worked with one team, but instead he chose, and I'm sure this happened over many years, because again, it's a small business. You're sort of, you have the bottleneck of how many people you have working for you and how many clients you can get, right? So I'm sure for many decades this individual worked and built his teams and got to where he is through a lot of effort, right, and hard work. But the thing was that delegation was what helped him get there. And so, with that story in mind, kind of switching to Before Grad, Before Grad's a startup, it's not a small business. And so the difference is with a startup is you're not limited by the number of staff you have. You're sort of just limited based on your market size, right? You think much bigger, and that's because of the scalability of software and the fact that you don't have to, serve every customer individually. The software handles that for you. And so instead, you see startups, Reflectly, the popular journaling app, for instance, scaled from quite literally angel round to IPO with 5 people, right? And so, maybe now it's 7, right? So it's pretty incredible that, with just a small team of people in a startup, you can actually reach such incredible milestones, right? And the reality is that, so the question then becomes, okay, so you delegate, right? So why is delegating so useful in the context of a startup, right? If you can just do all these things with just 5 members. Well, number one, I would say is, you've got to make sure those 5 members are autonomous as much as possible. So you want to make sure that you're delegating in a way that's efficient, right? So if you're somebody who has a lot of knowledge about the vision of the business, you want to provide your vision in, maybe weekly meetings, bi-weekly meetings. You want to remind your members of your team exactly what's going on, right? And exactly what's the highest priority, what should be worked on now, and that sort of thing. But additionally, you also want to look at it in the context of, how could we, for instance, design doesn't take as long as implementation, right? You realize this when you build a software company. If you could take 3 months to build a feature, but you could design that feature in 1 day. Right. So what happens is I'm often designing things at Before Grad. And so what happens is I'll design a bunch of, I'll have specification documents, I'll have, a bunch of sketches, and I'll hand that off to a designer, who's maybe outside the team, who, this designer has special skills, for instance, in Photoshop or in specific, sort of design software, and they can, spend hours and hours doing the graphic design and following user experience principles and all of that sort of thing, and have them handle that. And at the same time, once that designer's done, basically then hand over what he's made over to a software engineer, perhaps another freelancer, somebody I found off of Upwork, for instance, and then have them build the feature, right? And spend that 2 or 3 months building that. perhaps on a contract, or perhaps paying them on an hourly basis. And the advantage there is that feature is getting taken care of, right? So it gives every member of the team more time to work on other things, maybe features that are more difficult to build, or maybe bug fixing, or perhaps doing a fundraise. And the reality is that these are things that you've got to keep in mind as an entrepreneur, because if you were to do these things individually, again, you're going to take 10 or 20 or 30 times more of your own time to actually get that done. That same exact feature, right? Because you're having to do one thing after the other, and it's not simultaneous. In the case of somebody who's delegating, who's got, and again, right, I encourage entrepreneurs to go outside the team. You might have a member, or let's say you have one other member on the team, right? You've got two people and they're starting a startup. If you have just two people, right, you can't delegate a whole lot. But the reality is there's there's tons of freelancers out there, and some of them actually work for pretty cheap. You can look for guys in Vietnam who are great at iOS development, or graphic designers in Eastern Europe, and you can use websites like Fiverr or Upwork to find these guys. And they're very affordable, and they're hardworking, and they know English very well, so you can actually communicate with them over video calls. The most challenging part in that context is the time zone difference. But if you're willing to kind of work around that, and give up a few evenings just to kind of talk to these guys, what you can do is actually build something that would have normally taken 12 months. Like let's say we're trying to launch version 2.0 of Before Grad. Maybe it takes us a whole year to do that. Well, now it takes us maybe 4 months to do that, because we've got a freelancer building and designing all of these features simultaneously after I've provided each one with the specifications, and then I'm providing them feedback, right? So whenever they get, they reach a milestone, I'm providing additional feedback, and this is happening on an ongoing basis. And I've got a ton of free time to go and pitch investors, to create videos like this one, connect with my audience, whether it's the customers or whether it's investors or any other stakeholders involved. I could talk to my advisor, talk about things that maybe we're not considering, as part of the fundraise or building the business. And so this is really amazing, right? Because all of a sudden I've got way more getting done in a shorter amount of time, all because of one skill, delegating, right? And that's the power of delegating. I think it's a skill that goes beyond entrepreneurship. I think that, if you're an investor, for instance, you could use, this is what venture capitalists do, right? I mean, they literally have people who just look through pitch decks. They have a checklist and it says, if this company is doing this and this and this, I want a meeting with them. And they literally, and that's kind of how these firms work, right? And in the context of even just life in general, if you want to, organize a great date night, you don't even have to make the reservation at the restaurant yourself, or try to, schedule things. You could literally have a personal assistant, a virtual assistant that will do all of these things for you. You literally say, hey, organize a great time for me. I'm going to be in New York City next week, on Manhattan Island, organize a really great night. And I actually know somebody in particular who does exactly that. Everything from the ride to the reservation at the restaurant to even the way, the outfits, everything is literally designed around that. And it's actually a pretty amazing thing, right? And that's the power of delegating. And ultimately, I think this is a skill that you can really hone in on and use in life, even beyond building a company. So anyway, thank you so much, guys, for watching the video. I'm going to create some more of these videos and share some of my other insights regarding Before Grad and sort of the experience of being an entrepreneur. If you have any specific questions you would like addressed, you can reach me at anthonygbeforegrad.com, and you can also reach us, in any other form that you can find, whether it's a review on the App Store or on our social media accounts. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you and have a great day.